In Georgia, a record-breaking 2 million early votes were cast, and all eyes are focused on the state's race for governor. The latest polling shows Republican candidate Kemp, who is Georgia's current Secretary of State, with a minimal lead over Democrat candidate Stacey Abrams. If elected, Abrams, who's also a former state lawmaker, could become the country's first female African-American governor. She drew even more attention to this race when she accused Kemp of voter suppression for political gains. Kemp's office denies those claims and fired back, accusing the state's Democratic Party of attempting to hack into voter registration files. With the latest on this race and joining us from Atlanta is WGCL TV political reporter Giovanna Drpic. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So, all right, so let's break this down. Kemp said on Sunday that his office was investigating the state's Democratic Party for cyber crimes, and yesterday he pushed back against criticism that this move was politically motivated. So how is the controversy of these accusations affecting voter turnout today?
Well, what I believe is key is early voting. Early voting, as you mentioned, topped 2 million. Now, if you compare that to 2014, it was just under 1 million. Voter suppression has become a national talking point, and Kemp has become a focal point in many national pieces. Now, of course, we've had lawsuits filed against Secretary of State's office. We've had protests. I can even give you an example. Last night, we got an email from somebody who turned in an absentee ballot. This person said that the absentee ballot was rejected because of a mismatched signature. This person said that then they called the county 3 times, finally got that ballot, voted, went and checked the My Voter page, and it said there was no record of it. So this is just one example of people who are wondering what happened to their ballot. Now, I can tell you from talking to folks in that early voting line that they said, you know what, it doesn't matter if it's 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, I'm not going anywhere. Keep in mind, Cobb County is a critical area. And as far as Republicans, we see a lot of them voting on Election Day. They're more traditional. So while early voting is key to find out who are the people who early voted, were they Democrats, were they Republicans, it's also key to find out and keep in mind that on Election Day, a lot of traditional older Republican voters vote today.
Giovanna, it's interesting because Mr. Kemp has been the object of scrutiny when it comes to voter suppression in the state before this election. Back in 2015, for example, he announced a criminal investigation into the New Georgia Project. The New Georgia Project was a voter registration effort that was attempting to bring mostly minority voters onto the rolls, about 100,000, 120,000. And he demanded that this group turn over sort of massive internal records before allowing them to do so. How's he addressing some of those concerns that people have about that?
Now, first, let's start with some background on the New Georgia Project. This is a group that Stacey Abrams founded to increase minority participation. She said, you know what, we're not going to try to go after those Republican voters. We have enough voters whose voices haven't been heard in the past. We need to go after them. So she registered more than 200,000 people. Now, about 17 people are under investigation for potential voter fraud violations, voter registration violations, and so forth. So that's the background on the New Georgia Project. These people who have been registered, are they going to go out and vote? That's what we need to find out. That's the big unknown.
So, all right, so now both of these candidates have had major party leaders campaigning for them. As you know, President Trump hosted a rally in support of Kemp on Sunday. They drew thousands of people. Meanwhile, Oprah Winfrey and former President Barack Obama, as you know, both campaigned for Stacey Abrams. So explain how this race became nationalized, and do you think in your analysis that it will tell us something about the national environment?
I do believe that it will tell us something about the national environment. Now, President Trump has made no bones about it. He said that if there's so much interest in the midterm elections, it's because of him. And here in Georgia, I do believe that it is partly because of him. Georgia, I believe, is the face of the Trump disciples, if you will, and those who are against Trump. We've had some national figures on both sides. And the reason why President Trump came to Macon, Georgia in particular, was to seal the deal for Kemp. Now, just like former President Barack Obama, it is a risk. Both are polarizing figures, both are controversial figures, and we just don't know which side it's going to help.
All right, so let me draw your attention, or actually our viewers' attention, to one other thing that I think is kind of interesting. Georgia law requires a majority to win. There is also a libertarian on today's ballot. So is there a potential, I guess, for this race ending up in a runoff?
If you believe the polls, and since September, the vast majority of the polls, virtually all of them, have shown that this is going to a runoff. Now, let me explain this for you. In Georgia, if none of the candidates receive at least 50% of the vote plus one vote, it goes to a runoff. That runoff would be December 4th. Now, all along, all of these polls have shown that both candidates, Kemp and Abrams, have been, their figures are below the 50% threshold. But a couple of days ago, the Trafalgar Group had a poll, and this one is an outlier. Is that more reflective of what's going on, or are the other ones? In this Trafalgar Group poll, it showed that Kemp was ahead by 12 points. Now, that's a sizable lead.
Wow. All right, so what other races are you watching today?
A lot of people are wondering how the lieutenant governor's race is going to turn out. It's between Sarah Riggs Amico. She's a Harvard-educated head of a trucking company, her family's trucking company, against Jeff Duncan. He's a former state lawmaker, a small businessman, Christian. Now, here's the thing. In Georgia, the number one, number two jobs, they don't run together. So technically, there is the possibility that you could end up with a Republican in the number one spot and a Democrat in the number two spot, or a Democrat in the number one spot and a Republican in the number two spot. That would be interesting as to how they're going to run this state if that happens with a split ticket, a Democrat and a Republican. We're also watching the 6th district race. Now, you'll recall this was a huge race last year. It was between Democrat John Ossoff and Republican Karen Handel. Karen Handel ended up winning that race, and now she's trying to defend that. She's the incumbent. Lucy McBath, she's a former Delta flight attendant. She made national headlines because she became a gun safety advocate because she lost her only child in a widely publicized shooting case. Karen Handel, she is a former Secretary of State and former head of the Fulton County Commission. So that is one matchup that we are looking at, and we're closely watching that one.
Yeah, we'll be closely watching with you, Giovanna Drpic of our CBS 46 affiliate, WGCL. Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll talk to you tomorrow when we can figure out how right or how perhaps wrong we all were about this. Thank you.
Thank you.